Last few dreams after Trump have been incredibly strange. In fact, so strange that the last one I just made private because I thought it sounded so stupid and silly that I don't think something like that should be public. But this dream is even dumber, and so I might possibly do the same thing and take this down. However, this dream was a lot more terrifying. It was a lot worse in many different ways. In the prior dream, I saw a miniature world and how consciousness was transferred into a miniaturized version of a world. This dream, I saw an actual future. And I don't like using the word probable future. Можешь чуть тише сделать? Ты очень громко делаешь. Я пытаюсь что-то тут говорить. So I don't like using the word probable because all that is by default exists. And there is some grotesquely hideous thing contained within the mind of God, contained within all that is, things that are unimaginably horrifying. And I've always wondered why that is. What constitutes all that is? And perhaps this is a deformation of mind consisting of a struggle to come to terms with eternal existence. And that eternal struggle projects a version of itself that is distorted and what we would think of as ugly or strange. Now, all of it exists in one form or another. And that's really hard to come to terms with. Bashar said, all that is wouldn't be all that is if something didn't exist. Will, hello, how's it going? I agree with that to a certain degree. But there is, of course, the endless contradictions that take place. Like, if all that is all that is, then wouldn't all that is also be powerful enough to eradicate versions of thought forms of itself that we would deem as horrifying? Because it wouldn't. It would just say, why do you judge? There's nothing to judge, it's just all that is. Eternity is a sick thing. It's a sick thing, and the endless cycle is a struggle of eternal mind, of contemplating one's own existence. And we are part of that one, that forever, stuck in a forever void of contemplation and existence. So the dream started off, I was in a room and I was with a person that I know. Acquaintance, not a friend. And this person I've always been suspicious of, to be honest. Always gave me very strange vibes. And I was in a room that was full of books. It was like an old style Victorian room with wooden panels and flooring. And it looked very nice. And he proceeded to sit me down. He showed me a graph. a literal graph like you would see in a math class. And I saw numbers on the bottom of the graph. It said it was years. So I saw 2020, 2050, and then it ended at 2125. Exactly 100 years from now. After he pointed out that number 2125, I found myself in a giant laboratory with scientists in lab coats wearing protective gear. And they were messing with these disgusting creatures. They looked like something that's going to be very hard for me to describe. Kind of like the picture in the thumbnail, but not quite. They had small beanie eyes. They had very narrow jaws and faces. They had like little clumps of hairs coming out of their head, but otherwise no hair. They had a small mouth, but teeth that are kind of very close and fused together. They had a big belly, kind of like a penguin. They had short arms and short legs. I mean, very short arms and short legs. And so I'm looking at this scientist, and he's like trying to do something with this creature. And it responds to him, but it was only responding in these like grunt noises. It wasn't able to communicate or have any cognitive ability. It was like something that's like one step away from brain dead. It was like an amoeba, but in flesh and blood. It was very, very, very devolved. And I saw this massive warehouse full of these creatures on beds. And they were all just laying there making these grunt noises. And all these scientists were going around trying to do something with them, trying to stimulate them, or they're trying to mess with their genetics, which I saw later in the dream. And the scientists were frustrated because it wasn't doing anything. What comes to my mind is the beginning of the creation story, Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What exactly was the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Good question, Will. It probably has something to do with the Kabbalistic tree, um, most likely, and archetypes of mind that are embedded within consciousness. And those things are very important because these symbols that are ingrained deep within the subconscious are responsible for our creative potential and our creative forces. So perhaps they unleashed a flurry of creative potential within the mind of man. Maybe they couldn't handle it, maybe they could, but they were probably keeping it from man to prevent them from having power. But I don't know. So, so I was taken to another room and I saw these other mutants. These were totally different though. These were these were a lot worse. You know, have you ever seen the Alien Resurrection movie with what's that actress's name? But they made all kinds of hybrids and mutants in that movie. That's what these look like. They had really strange like holes in their skin. They were able to detach parts of their body, and then those parts would be start moving around on their own. Uh, they were able to like bend in all kinds of ways and twist, and it just looked so disturbing to watch. Um, and the scientists, they were proud of these. They were proud that they were able to genetically manipulate these creatures because they weren't as cognitively dead as the other little disgusting creatures on the beds. They were actually somewhat functional, but barely. So they, I saw them kind of giving up and, basically destroying the warehouses, just killing everything except for the mutants. And then I see them go off in space into a nebula of some kind with the mutants. Now, imagine that for a second. Now, I do believe in a kind of evolution, but I don't believe it's like a Darwinian evolution. I think that we have evolved, but I think that it happened a lot more rapidly than millions and millions and billions of years necessarily. I think in certain situations, species can de-evolve or evolve very rapidly. And I believe that whatever happened in this situation, there was genetic manipulation going on a long time ago. Maybe the jab, I don't know, which rapidly de-evolve. Like, it's really not that far-fetched to me. I mean, the human race as of now are already kind of mindless creatures, just reacting to things and staring at screens all day and pressing buttons and hardly speaking or communicating or really having an in-depth connection with anything. So it's interesting to think if those things got so addicted to tech that's what they turned into. I think that was the analogy of the dream, in my opinion. I think that's what it was trying to point to, and it's possible that the creatures were symbolic and not necessarily real physical creatures. Maybe they were symbolic of the mind of man that becomes that in 100 years from now. The mind is small and it can't communicate. So, if I hope it's because this place is already so hopeless, guys. I hate for that to happen because it's so obnoxiously long and hopeless and ridiculous, everything we're seeing, that it just feels like it'll never end. And I just hope to God that is not the case. And I would like to think that it would be the opposite and like a real enlightenment, but or the eradication of the simulator altogether. They told me not to eat or partake of that fruit, the tree of knowledge. Then Eve was tempted first, and Adam be the evil one, or devil, if you will. I don't know. I think in that case, all parties are evil, Will. All involved are evil. I think they're just tricking one another in one game or another. There's just very little in the way of benevolence here or something for our benefit. I don't think everything is some medium of trickery or control. So I don't think it's smart to take sides. And just is better off. We're better off just not trusting anything really. But that was the dream. Maybe I'll keep this one up because this is an important one. It's a teacher. It's a teacher. This dream is a teacher, a mental teacher. So